Today we're joined by Sarah Farrell, Head of Private Equity for Europe and Asia at ALLSTATE. Thank you very much for joining us, Sarah.
Pleasure.
Why don't you quickly introduce yourself and ALLSTATE?
So ALLSTATE is a US-listed general insurance company. We have a balance sheet that sits at about $70 billion, and I work within the private markets team focusing on private equity, and as you said, I am the head of Europe and Asia, so I'm basically the non-US private equity balance sheet allocation.
And how would you say the LP-GP relationship's changed? Do you think LPs are now in the driving seat, or how do you see the market going?
I think that possibly we're at a bit of an inflection point. So, high quality GPs are always in demand. But for example, as we came through 2021, it was it's always about a demand supply balance. And I'd say through 2021, we were seeing really a lot of GP fundraisings going on, a lot of people who were very significantly increasing their fund sizes and increasing the velocity of their deployment, so they were raising more funds more quickly. And we were in a position with some very high quality managers where we were being told, you need to have your work done in 6-8 weeks, and it's going to be a one and done closing to our process. And so in those situations, especially with people who have very strong performance, you're in less of a position, depending on what your relationship is and how big your ticket is relative to the total size of the fund, you're not in such a strong position to negotiate. And I think now that dynamic is slightly different. I think some managers are over allocated. There was a share price adjustment, public markets adjustment in 2022. Some people were over allocated. Since then, interest rates have moved, distributions are down, and some LPs, it's more difficult to deploy capital. So again, with that demand supply balance, that probably, all things being equal, puts LPs in a better position to negotiate.
And a lot has been discussed about re-upping in relationships, having strong relationships with GPs. How important is it to have those really good relationships with key members?
I mean, to me, relationships are very important. And, I'm not, unlike my public market colleagues, if I'm in something and I decide, I don't, this is the right time to sell, or I don't have such conviction in this pick anymore. The very nature of public liquid markets is that it's very easy to exit these positions, whereas the relationships I'm entering into are by definition for multi years. So if I'm committing to a fund, that's like a 10 to 12 year commitment. So it's important that you feel that there's transparency and a good relationship, and especially for the type of investing we do, which involves co-investment. There's a very key important trust component to that, and that carries on. It's in the context of re-ups. If the sort of trust is broken, or you don't feel that there's transparency there, and obviously this is all a two-way street, then that makes that whole longer-term relationship dynamic more complicated. So I would say it's very important.
And what's top of the list for LPs when looking for GPs? Is it solely performance, or are there other things at work there?
Yeah, performance is definitely very important. It's also, in assessing that, that doesn't mean that someone needs to, and at least in my opinion, have necessarily a perfect report card, so to speak, but that where there have been mistakes, reflection over those mistakes and refinement to strategy. It's about, therefore, what a consistently applied strategy has generated in terms of a return profile in the past. We're looking for, good, solid returns with more limited volatility. And then if you take that playbook, and it's also about consistency of the team who actually generated the track record, and you can overlay that into the current macro environment and develop conviction that it's repeatable, then that's pretty critical. So I'm not really answering your question, but so is track record important? Yes, it is, but there are sort of dimensions to that and different ways of looking at it. In addition, it is about absolutely, as you say, the fairness of terms. It's about the nature of the relationship and the transparency and that the governance works properly and that LPs are properly listened to and that we are fairly treated.
I think finally, you kind of touch on the macroeconomic situation. It's clear that higher rates are probably here to stay.
Yeah.
What are your kind of thoughts on what's coming next? What comes in the next year or so?
All things being equal, private equity returns are more difficult to generate if you're with the use of leverage if credit is more expensive, and I suppose that's pretty obvious. But what I'm seeing now, I just think that working with particular types of managers who have well-tested playbooks, and perhaps in some instances seeing those who more struggle to deliver really consistent returns with higher interest rates, we might see them coming out of the market potentially. So I think that with the right partners, I still have conviction that solid returns can be delivered. It's harder though, definitely.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.